The blistering afternoon sun beat down on Yuba City's train depot like God's own judgment. But it wasn't the California heat that stopped Hunter Yates in his tracks. It was the sight of a young woman, clearly with child, sitting alone on a bench with nothing but a small carpetbag and tears streaming down her dust-streaked face. Spring of 1873 had brought little relief to the drought-stricken Sacramento Valley, and even less mercy to those who called it home. Hunter adjusted his worn Stetson, sweat trickling down his temple as he approached the woman. Her lavender dress was wrinkled from travel, hands trembling as she clutched a crumpled telegram. "Madam," he ventured, keeping a respectful distance. "Train's gone for the day, station's about to close up." She looked up, revealing eyes the color of summer sage, rimmed red from crying. Couldn't be more than 20 years old, Hunter reckoned, though the weariness in her gaze aged her considerably. "I was supposed to be met," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He promised he'd be waiting." Hunter didn't need to ask who he was. The gold band on her finger and the swell of her belly told enough of the story. He'd seen this before women lured west by promises of love and prosperity, only to be abandoned when reality proved harsher than fantasy. "Whoever left you ain't worth the dust beneath your feet, madam," Hunter said, the words coming out before he could think better of them. The woman's chin quivered, but she straightened her back. "My name is Zoe Northcott, not madam, and my husband." Her voice faltered. "Patrick swore he'd built us a home here." Hunter nodded slowly, offering his canteen. "Hunter Yates, I've got a wagon outside if you need somewhere to go for the night." She hesitated, one protective hand moving to her belly. "I don't know you, Mr. Yates." "No, Madam Miss Northcott, you surely don't. But night's coming, and Yuba City ain't the place for a woman alone after dark." He gestured toward the telegraph office. "We can check if your husband left any messages. After that, my sister runs a boarding house on Maple Street, proper place for a lady." Zoe studied him with careful eyes. Hunter knew what she saw: a weathered cowboy of 30 years, trail dust embedded in the creases of his sun-darkened skin, calloused hands that spoke of hard work. Not the type decent women typically trusted on first meeting. "I have money," she said finally, reaching for her bag. "I can pay for lodging." "Nobody's suggesting charity," Hunter replied. "Just offering a ride before the station master locks up." The depot was indeed emptying, the last straggling passengers having disappeared into waiting carriages or toward the town's main street. Only the station master remained, eyeing them impatiently as he jingled his keys. With reluctance born of necessity, Zoe nodded and allowed Hunter to carry her bag. The spring air was cooling as dusk approached, carrying the scent of distant blossoms mixed with the ever-present dust. Hunter's wagon was nothing fancy, a simple buckboard pulled by 2 steady quarter horses. He helped Zoe up to the seat, noticing how she winced as she settled, one hand bracing her lower back. "How far along?" he asked, climbing up beside her. 7 months, perhaps a little more," she answered, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "Patrick and I married last summer. He came west in autumn to establish our home, sent for me when he claimed all was ready." Hunter clicked his tongue at the horses, setting them into motion. "And who might this Patrick be? Perhaps I know of him." "Patrick Donahue. He wrote that he purchased land near the river, was building a house for us." Hunter's grip tightened on the reins. He knew every property transaction within 20 miles of Yuba City, and no Donahue had purchased land in recent memory. A sick feeling settled in his stomach. The telegraph office confirmed Hunter's suspicions. No messages had been left for any Mrs. Donahue or Northcott. The clerk, an older man with spectacles perched on his nose, searched through his logs with increasing discomfort. "I'm sorry, madam. No one by that name has sent or received telegrams through this office." Zoe's face remained impressively composed as they left, though Hunter noticed how her knuckles whitened around the handle of her carpetbag. Only when they were back in the wagon did she speak. "Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding," she said, her voice tight with forced optimism. "Patrick might have been delayed, or perhaps he's staying under another name." Hunter didn't have the heart to voice his thoughts. Instead, he guided the horses toward Maple Street, where his sister's boarding house stood, a 3-story Victorian painted a cheerful yellow, with a broad porch adorned with potted geraniums. Hannah Yates Miller was 10 years Hunter's senior, a widow who had transformed grief into enterprise after losing her husband to a mining accident. She greeted them at the door, her sharp eyes taking in Zoe's condition and her brother's concerned expression. "Well, don't just stand there letting the mosquitoes in," she said briskly. "Come inside and tell me what trouble you've brought me this time, Hunter." Within the hour, Zoe was settled in Hannah's best available room, had been served a proper meal, and had reluctantly shared the details of her journey from Boston. Hunter sat in his sister's kitchen, turning his hat in his hands as Hannah prepared coffee. "She's been duped," Hannah stated plainly, setting a steaming cup before him. "This Patrick fellow, if that's even his real name, is no better than a snake." "Seems that way," Hunter agreed grimly. "Question is, what becomes of her now? Baby's coming in a couple months and she's got nowhere to go." Hannah sighed, smoothing her apron. "She can stay here until the child comes. After that, well, a respectable widow with a child might find work as a teacher or seamstress." "She ain't a widow, Hannah. She's been abandoned. As far as this town needs to know, her husband died on his way to meet her. Easier that way." Hannah gave him a pointed look. "Unless you're proposing another solution," Hunter scowled. "Just saying we ought to help her get on her feet." Hannah hummed noncommittally. "You always did have a soft spot for strays, little brother. Just remember that woman up there is carrying another man's child. Whatever notions might be forming in that head of yours, best set them aside." Hunter left shortly after, riding back to his small ranch 3 miles outside of town. The night sky spread vast and star-strewn above him, but his thoughts remained in that yellow house on Maple Street, with a woman whose trust had been so thoroughly betrayed. The following morning, Hunter returned to town on the pretext of business at the Mercantile. In truth, he wanted to check on Zoe, perhaps offer to make inquiries about her husband. He found her on the boarding house porch, helping Hannah string beans, her face looking marginally less drawn than the previous day. "Mr. Yates," she acknowledged him with a nod. "Your sister has been most kind." "Hunter, please," he corrected, removing his hat. "Hannah mentioned you're planning to ask around town about your husband. Yes, I refuse to believe Patrick would simply abandon us." Her hand drifted to her belly, a gesture that seemed more protective than affectionate. "There must be an explanation." Hunter exchanged a look with Hannah. "I'd be happy to make those inquiries for you, save you the walking in your condition." "That's very kind, but let him help, child," Hannah interjected gently. "Hunter knows every soul in Yuba City and half the county besides. If your husband is anywhere to be found, my brother will locate him." Zoe reluctantly agreed, providing Hunter with a daguerreotype of Patrick, a handsome man with a confident smile and fashionable whiskers. Hunter promised to return by supper time and set off with the picture, though his expectations were low. By midday, Hunter had visited every saloon, hotel, and business establishment in Yuba City. No one recognized Patrick Donahue, though one bartender at the Rusty Spur squinted at the image with a thoughtful frown. Might have passed through. "Can't say for certain, but there was a fellow matching that description who spent a week here last fall. Called himself Paul, though. Drank good whiskey, played better poker. Left with a mining outfit headed for the Sierra foothills. It wasn't much, but it was something." Hunter extended his search to the livery stables and freight offices. At Wilson's Freight and Dispatch, he finally struck pay dirt. "Oh, I remember him," said the clerk, a rail, thin man with ink-stained fingers. "Not as Donahue, though. He signed his package as Peter Daniels. Received a trunk from back east about 2 months ago, paid to store it until called for." "What became of it?" "Still here." The clerk gestured toward a back room. "Paid storage through June. Said he'd collect it after he returned from Sacramento." Hunter arranged to see the trunk, hoping it might contain some clue to Patrick's whereabouts or true identity. The clerk, after some persuasion and a silver-dollar, agreed to let Hunter examine it the following day when his manager would be absent. Returning to Hannah's boarding house, Hunter found Zoe resting in the parlor, a book open but unread in her lap. Her face brightened at his entrance, then fell as she registered his expression. "You found nothing," she guessed. "Not exactly," Hunter said, lowering himself into the chair opposite her. "I found traces of a man who might be your husband, but he's been using different names." He gently shared what he'd learned, watching the hope drain from her eyes to be replaced with something harder, a dawning realization that her worst fears might be true. "There's a trunk at Wilson's," he finished. "I'm going to look at it tomorrow, might tell us more." Zoe was quiet for so long that Hunter thought she might not respond at all. When she finally spoke, her voice was steadier than he expected. "I'd like to see it myself," she said. "If it belongs to Patrick, I'll know. Mrs. Northcott, please, Mr. Yates. I need to know the truth, whatever it may be." Hunter couldn't refuse her. They agreed to meet the next morning, and he took his leave, troubled by the resolve he'd seen in those green eyes. He spent a restless night at his ranch, thoughts circling between concern for Zoe and anger at the man who had abandoned her. The trunk proved to be the final nail in Patrick Donahue's coffin of lies. It contained men's clothing, mining tools, and a small leather case with 3 different sets of identification papers. Most damning of all was a letter, dated from just weeks before, addressed to a Mrs. Margaret Donahue in St. Louis, apparently Patrick's actual wife. Zoe read the letter in silence, her face ashen. When she finished, she carefully refolded it and placed it back in the trunk. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Yates," she said formally. "I believe I have my answer now." Hunter watched helplessly as she walked out of Wilson's Freight and Dispatch, her back straight despite the weight she carried. He caught up with her halfway down the street, where she had stopped to lean against a hitching post, one hand pressed against her side. "Are you unwell?" he asked, alarmed by the pain evident on her face. "Just a spasm," she said, though her breathing was labored. "The baby is active today." Hunter offered his arm, which she accepted after a moment's hesitation. They walked slowly back toward Hannah's, the morning sun already hot on their shoulders. "What will you do now?" Hunter asked. Zoe's laugh was brittle. "I hardly know. I have some savings, enough perhaps to return east, though what awaits me there is worse than poverty. My parents made it clear that my marriage," she stumbled over the word, "was my only chance at respectability." "You could stay in Yuba City," Hunter suggested, surprising himself. "It's a growing town. People don't ask too many questions of newcomers." "As what? An unwed mother, a woman deceived and abandoned." "As a widow," Hunter said quietly. "As Hannah suggested, no shame in that." They had reached the boarding house steps. Zoe paused, studying him with those searching eyes. "Why are you helping me, Mr. Yates? You owe me nothing." Hunter considered his words carefully. "My ma found herself in a similar situation once. My pa left her with 4 young children to chase gold in '49. Never came back. Folks helped us survive. Suppose I'm just paying that forward." It wasn't the whole truth. Hunter couldn't quite explain the protective instinct that had stirred in him since finding Zoe at the depot, but it seemed to satisfy her. She nodded and made her way inside, declining his further assistance. Over the next weeks, Zoe gradually established herself in Yuba City. Hannah introduced her as a recently widowed relative from back east, and the town accepted this story without question. Zoe's quiet dignity and obvious pregnancy generated sympathy rather than suspicion. Hunter found himself visiting the boarding house more frequently than was his habit. He brought wild strawberries he'd discovered on his property, fresh eggs from his hens, occasionally a book he thought she might enjoy. Each visit revealed new facets of Zoe's character: her dry wit, her intelligence, her surprising knowledge of animal husbandry gained from childhood summers on her grandparents' farm. On a warm evening in late May, Hunter found Zoe sitting alone on the boarding house porch swing, gazing at the sunset. Her condition was now pronounced, her movements more deliberate as she accommodated her changing body. "Evening," Hunter greeted her, setting a small basket beside the swing. "Brought some early peaches from Old Man Rivera's orchard." "Thank you," Zoe smiled, making room for him on the swing. "Hannah's gone to a church meeting. She said you might stop by." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the sky turned from gold to pink to deepening purple. The air was sweet with jasmine from the vine that climbed the porch trellis. "I found work today," Zoe announced suddenly. "Mrs. Hargrove at the millinery shop needs an assistant. She says I can bring the baby once it's old enough." Hunter nodded, pleased but not surprised. Zoe had been methodically building connections in town, clearly planning for independence. "That's good news," he said. "Mrs. Hargrove is fair-minded. Her late husband was the town doctor. She understands hardship." "Hannah helped arrange it," Zoe admitted. "She's been kinder than I could have hoped." She hesitated, then added, "As have you, Hunter." It was the first time she'd used his given name, and something about hearing it in her soft voice made his heart quicken. "Just being neighborly," he deflected, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting. Zoe's hand found his on the swing between them. "No, it's more than that, and we both know it." Before Hunter could respond, she winced sharply, her free hand going to her belly. "Zoe." "It's nothing," she assured him, though her face betrayed discomfort. "The baby's been restless all day. Dr. Warren says everything appears normal, though he thinks I may deliver earlier than expected." Hunter tried to ignore the fear that statement provoked. Childbirth was dangerous even under ideal circumstances, and Zoe would face it without the child's father in a town where she was still essentially a stranger. "Hannah will be with you," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "And Dr. Warren delivered half the children in this county." Zoe squeezed his hand. "I'm not afraid, Hunter. Whatever comes, I'll face it." The determination in her voice made him believe her. As May turned to June, Zoe's time grew nearer. Hunter found himself inventing reasons to be in town, his ranch responsibilities delegated to his hired hand, so he could never be too far from the boarding house. Hannah teased him mercilessly about his obvious concern, but there was approval beneath her jibes. On the morning of June 15th, Hannah's urgent knock woke Hunter from sleep in the small room he sometimes used at the livery stable when staying in town. "It's time," was all she said, and Hunter was instantly alert, pulling on his boots. "How long?" Her waters broke just after midnight. "Doctor Warren's with her now, but it's moving fast. She's asking for you." Hunter's heart leaped at those words, though he kept his expression neutral as he followed his sister through the pre-dawn streets. The town was still quiet, only a few lamps glowing in windows as early risers prepared for the day. At the boarding house, Hannah led him to the parlor rather than upstairs. "Wait here," she instructed. "I'll tell her you've come." Left alone, Hunter paced the familiar room, stopping to stare unseeing at the paintings on the walls, the carefully arranged knickknacks on the mantel. From upstairs came the muffled sounds of movement, an occasional voice, but no cries of pain which both relieved and worried him. Hannah returned after what seemed an eternity. "She's progressing well," she reported. "Dr. Warren says another hour, perhaps two. She wanted me to tell you not to fret." Hunter almost smiled at that. Of course Zoe would be concerned about his worry even as she labored to bring a child into the world. "I'll stay," he said simply. Hannah nodded as if she'd expected nothing else. "There's coffee in the kitchen. Help yourself." The other boarders have gone out for the day. The sun was fully risen, streaming through the parlor windows when a newborn's cry pierced the quiet house. Hunter, who had been staring into his third cup of cold coffee, bolted to his feet. The cry was strong, indignant, full of life. Minutes later, Hannah appeared at the top of the stairs, her face tired but beaming. "You have a nephew," she announced. Hunter blinked in confusion. "A what?" "A healthy boy," Hannah clarified, descending the stairs. 7 pounds if he's an ounce, with a head of dark hair and his mother's determination. "Zoe wants to see you." "Now, is that appropriate?" Hannah's expression softened. Little brother, nothing about this situation is what you'd call appropriate. But that woman upstairs has chosen to name her son Hunter. I think that gives you certain privileges. Stunned, Hunter followed his sister upstairs to Zoe's room. Dr. Warren was just leaving, his medical bag in hand. Congratulations, the doctor said, clapping Hunter on the shoulder. Mother and child are doing splendidly. She's a strong one, your wife. Hunter opened his mouth to correct him but was cut off by Hannah's warning glance. The misconception had clearly taken root, and now wasn't the time to address it. Inside the room, Zoe was propped against pillows, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face flushed but radiant. In her arms was a small bundle wrapped in a white blanket. She looked up as Hunter entered, her smile tired but genuine. "Come meet your namesake," she said softly. Hunter approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid his presence might somehow disturb the miraculous scene before him. The baby was sleeping, his tiny face peaceful. One small fist escaped from the blanket. "You named him after me?" Hunter asked, his voice rough with emotion. "Hunter Northcott," Zoe confirmed. "It seemed fitting. You've been his protector since before he was born." Hunter sank carefully onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the trust this represented, by the sight of this new life that had entered the world against such odds. "He's perfect," he said inadequately, reaching out to touch the baby's hand with one careful finger. "Would you like to hold him?" Before Hunter could protest that his hands were too rough, too large for such a delicate task, Zoe was placing the bundle in his arms. The weight of the baby was startling, so light, yet somehow the heaviest responsibility Hunter had ever held. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, looking from the child to its mother. "You don't need to say anything." Zoe's eyes were soft with exhaustion and something else Hunter couldn't quite name. "Just be here. That's enough for now." In that moment, holding a child that wasn't his by blood but had somehow claimed a piece of his heart, Hunter knew he wanted to be there not just for now, but for all the days to come. The weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and new routines. Zoe recovered quickly from the birth, determined to begin her position at the millinery shop as soon as possible. Hannah, declaring herself an honorary grandmother, often cared for little Hunter when Zoe was working. Actual Hunter found himself restructuring his entire life around visits to town. He moved temporarily into a room at his sister's boarding house, ostensibly to help with repairs to the property, but really to be near Zoe and the baby. The arrangement raised eyebrows, but Hannah's stern presence provided enough propriety to keep gossip at a minimum. On a cool evening in late July, Hunter returned from his ranch to find Zoe walking the parlor with a fussy baby. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but she still managed to smile when he entered. "He's cutting his first tooth, I think," she explained as the baby whimpered against her shoulder. "Nothing seems to comfort him." "Let me try," Hunter offered, holding out his arms. To both their surprise, little Hunter settled almost immediately against the cowboy's broad chest, his cries subsiding to hiccuping breaths. Zoe watched in wonder as Hunter paced the room, one large hand supporting the baby's head with unexpected tenderness. "How did you do that?" she asked when the baby had finally drifted to sleep. Hunter shrugged carefully, mindful of his precious burden. "Ranch horses are the same way sometimes, just need a steady presence." Zoe laughed softly. "Are you comparing my son to a horse, Mr. Yates?" "Both are handsome fellows with strong opinions," Hunter replied with a grin. "But no, madam, this little one's much more valuable than any horse I've ever owned." The baby continued to sleep peacefully as Hunter lowered himself into a rocking chair. Zoe sank gratefully onto the sofa, allowing herself a moment of rest. "You're good with him," she observed. "Have you thought about having children of your own someday?" The question caught Hunter off guard. "I suppose I always figured it would happen eventually. Right woman, right time, all that." "And have you found her? The right woman?" Their eyes met across the quiet parlor, the only sound the gentle creak of the rocking chair and the baby's soft breathing. "I believe I might have," Hunter said carefully, But her life is complicated enough at present. Zoe's gaze didn't waver. Perhaps she's strong enough to handle one more complication, if it's the right kind. Before Hunter could respond, the front door opened and Hannah entered, bringing with her the scent of evening air and the sounds of the town settling down for the night. The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been building since that first encounter at the train depot. August brought sweltering heat to the Sacramento Valley. Zoe, now working full-time at the millinery shop with little Hunter installed in a basket behind the counter, had established herself as a respected member of the community. Her presumed widowhood and her obvious devotion to her child had earned her the sympathy and support of Yuba City's matrons. Hunter, meanwhile, had finally returned to his ranch full-time, though he still rode into town every few days. On one such visit, he found Zoe alone on the boarding house porch after dark, the baby asleep inside under Hannah's watchful eye. "You're out late," he commented, taking a seat beside her on the steps. "Needed some air," she replied, fanning herself with a folded newspaper. "The upstairs rooms are stifling, even with the windows open." They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the distant piano from the saloon down the street and the chorus of cicadas in the trees. "I've been thinking," Hunter said finally. "My ranch house is cooler, being out of town and up on that rise. There's a spare room that gets a good breeze, even on the hottest days." Zoe turned to look at him, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "Hunter Yates, are you inviting me and my baby to come live at your ranch? Just until this heat breaks," he clarified quickly. "For your comfort." "Hannah's welcome too, of course." "Of course," Zoe echoed, a smile in her voice. "And what would the good people of Yuba City say about such an arrangement?" Hunter shifted uncomfortably. "They already believe I'm the baby's father. Most folks assume we're married in all but ceremony." "And that doesn't bother you? Being tied to another man's child in the public mind?" "No," Hunter said without hesitation. "What bothers me is seeing you struggle when I have the means to make things easier." Zoe was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was thoughtful. "When Patrick, or whatever his real name is, left me at that depot, I thought my life was over. I couldn't imagine a future beyond shame and hardship." She turned to face Hunter fully. "But here I am, with a beautiful son, work that I enjoy, friends who support me. And you, Hunter. Always you from that first day. I'm just, if you say just being neighborly one more time, I may have to slap you," Zoe interrupted with surprising vehemence. "You've been far more than a neighbor to me and my son. It's time we acknowledged that." Hunter's heart hammered in his chest. "What exactly are we acknowledging, Zoe?" "That I love you," she said simply. "That you love me. That we've been building a family these past months without ever putting a name to it." The words hung in the warm night air between them, honest and unhurried, like they'd been waiting all along to be spoken. "I do love you," Hunter admitted, reaching for her hand. "Have since I found you crying at that depot, but I didn't want to take advantage of your situation." Zoe's fingers intertwined with his. "My situation is that I'm a grown woman who knows her own mind. I've been made a fool of once by a man I barely knew. I won't make that mistake again." Her thumb traced circles on his palm. "I know you, Hunter Yates. I've seen your character in 100 small acts of kindness. I've watched you with my son. I trust you with my heart because you've earned that trust." Hunter lifted their joined hands, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "In that case, Zoe Northcott, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not for appearances, not for convenience, but because I want to spend my life with you and that remarkable boy of yours." Zoe's smile was luminous in the moonlight. "Yes," she said, "on one condition. Name it. That you never again refer to Hunter as that boy of mine. He's ours now in every way that matters." Hunter's throat tightened with emotion. "Ours," he agreed. "Our son." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the town church, with Hannah standing as witness and baby Hunter cradled in his mother's arms. The town turned out in force, genuinely happy for the young family. The unusual circumstances of their meeting long since rewritten in local lore as a romantic reunion rather than a chance encounter. That evening, as they settled into the ranch house that would now be their family home, Zoe found Hunter on the porch, looking out over the land that stretched toward the distant mountains. "Having second thoughts?" she asked, coming to stand beside him. Hunter shook his head, drawing her into his arms. "Just counting my blessings. A year ago I was alone out here, convinced that was my lot in life. Now I have a wife, a son, a future I never dared imagine. All because you stopped to help a stranger," Zoe mused. "Do you remember what you said to me that day at the depot?" Hunter smiled against her hair. "That whoever left you wasn't worth the dust beneath your feet." "You were right," Zoe said, turning in his arms to face him. "Patrick's betrayal led me to something far better than anything he promised. It led me to you." As the sun set over their land, casting long shadows across the porch where they stood, Hunter kissed his wife with all the tenderness and passion he'd held in check for so long. Inside the house, their son slept peacefully, unaware of the journey that had brought his parents together or the love that would shape his future. From abandoned stranger to beloved wife and mother, from solitary rancher to family man, their unlikely story had only just begun. But standing there in the gathering dusk, holding each other close as night settled over Yuba City, Hunter and Zoe knew with absolute certainty that they had found their true home in each other's arms.